So the way we're going to learn to do that is to have people practice, and then the philosophy sort of supports it. Questions naturally arise in people as they get quieter and are doing this investigation. And then one or another point of view will probably be more useful. I mean, actually, my teacher taught me both on purpose, because I'm me, I guess, so that could happen too. But it's not like, maybe this will help answer your question. So I've worked with people who had meditated in a tradition for a while and they felt stuck. And what I gleaned from talking to them is that their orientation, let's say a dualistic orientation, was no longer serving them. Like they had gotten to a place where it just wasn't working and they were feeling frustrated and demotivated. So I helped them begin to understand the other point of view. But that was a strategy, right? It's like a strategy to help somebody kind of unstick. It's all true. Like you have to, or the other way to look at it is, as the Tao says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. Like it's not like this is all ideas, right? This is all philosophy. It's orientation, but it's not the thing. So it's a tool. As a general rule, most people, if they're beginning meditators, you're going to start with a dualistic framework for them because that's what they're experiencing. And it's going to be like a reach, right? Like if you just say like, it's all good, man, like it doesn't, it's a nice thing, but it doesn't really hit, in a way that's going to really help you when you're suffering. Because you're like, I'm not experiencing it as good. So you might pick up the Yoga Sutras and glean a couple of points from the Yoga Sutras. And if we're looking at this one, is that there's a kind of order or progression we can do things, and that's going to be really helpful to us. So, I mean, in my mind, the most genius thing about the Yoga Sutras is the path it lays out, because like most meditation texts don't do this. So it says, hey, yamas and niyamas, and then sort of take care of your body, and then do some pranayama. It has all these like, what you could say are preparatory practices, but they're really just, if you look at them in the most liberal view, it's going to be really hard to meditate if your body's a mess. It's going to be really hard to meditate if you're like a reverse breather. That's going to maybe be difficult for you. If your nervous system is a certain way, it's going to be really difficult for you to meditate if you haven't experienced the withdrawal of the senses, which is one of those steps. Like if you're always going external and reaching for every sound and sight, like it's going to be really hard for you to meditate. So let's do some practices around that first. And then it's going to be really hard for you to meditate if you can't concentrate on something. If like even that idea of focusing on something sends your mind into a like complete panic, like that skill is going to need to be developed. I mean, this is where like a lot of, and in our system, what we might say is like, if we can't develop a tranquility state, we can't really do anything else after that. It's going to be hard to feel your oneness with all things if you can't sit for 15 minutes and feel relatively okay, right? So, that's where most people start, and you can go very far with it because it just keeps going. Patanjali things like keeps going all the way to enlightenment. So you can certainly stay there. But there's a point where bringing in concepts of like things aren't one way or another. They're both, or everything's the same. These kinds of big circular concepts that make our mind melt can be important because it gets us out of our regular patterns and thinking states. So you could look at the Spanda Karika just as that. Study that text, keep studying it, and keep sort of thinking about it, because it'll help you not think in the exact same way. And then there's a more advanced concept, which is, I believe, that you need both of these concepts if you were going to really be an advanced meditator, if you want to call it that, or like really go for this self-knowledge and merging thing, because it's very hard to get tied to one way of looking at things and let go of everything, right? Like those two ideas don't match. Like, surrendering to everything while believing that there's only one way to do it is not a real match. One thing that might help to remember for everybody is that humans turn everything into dogma. Like that's what we do. So it's like you hang out with any text long enough, you are going to turn it into the way things are. And that's when you're slightly off track. Well, the non-dualistic point of view says desire, what it really says is everything is a vehicle. It's a great word, right? Everything is a vehicle towards what you're trying to do, right? Which is, we're just going to say merge with nature. We'll use that for now, right? So desire is that. So you've got two choices from those 2 points of views. You can ignore your desire, which is limitless. So you say, desire, man, no matter how many cookies I eat, you want another damn cookie, right? So enough with you. I'm done with you. Witness, I'm creating space from you because you're not really helping me. What the non-dualist would say is fall all the way in and become completely present with that desire. And when you do, magic is going to happen. You're going to put the cookie in your mouth and you're going to realize that not only is the cookie the best thing you've ever tasted, but it wasn't your desire in the first place, because merging with nature is your desire. And I can even do that while eating a cookie. They're not, so it's just a matter of like how you're orienting to them. Is it bad or not useful? Bad's kind of harsh, but like not particularly useful to me at this time? Or can I orient in a way where it's totally okay? Like my thoughts and feelings and all the things that are happening inside me are part of nature. Because as the Tao says, good and bad, hard and easy, right? Want the cookie, don't want the cookie. Nothing exists. They all exist together. So why are we pushing it away? So it's a matter of your strategy in a way. Is your strategy going to be to push it away for now so that you can like pay some attention to other stuff? Or is your strategy going to be to be 100% present with that desire? And desire in Tantra is the thing. Like desire is the thing because we all have so many desires. The Tantrikas are like, their argument is, you've got so many desires, you better learn to use them, right? You better get real comfortable and understand that all desire comes from the same place. The cookie, the wanting money, the wanting your hair to be a different color, everything, the wanting to be loved, it's all the same. And so what you have to do is like, let yourself ride those desires back to the source. And that's why the non-dualistic point of view is often the first stop, because it's way easier to understand, right? Because it's really easy to understand. Yeah, I know you want the cookie, just don't eat the cookie. You're like, okay. I can understand that. Like, I don't have to be a philosophy major to understand this concept. Like lots of people, right, are alcoholics and they go to AA for 10 years and, they're like, I'm still an alcoholic. I never ever drink because that would be really bad. And here's my framework. Then it might be, right, like a really interesting concept that these desires are okay. And there's another part, since you asked about addiction, that's interesting, which is that if you get completely okay and can relax in your meditation practice into that all desires come from the same place, they don't have much hold on you anymore. And then it just becomes about choice. So a word that's used a lot is freedom in that context. Because we're free to choose whether we have a drink or not, whether we do anything or not. But the question really is, are we making choices, or are we sort of driven by our desires? Because we're always going to, like, the reality is you're going to choose to do something, right? You're going to do things, but it becomes, we're going to talk about action and non-action probably next, but it becomes non-action when it's just a free choice. You're not being dragged or carried by anything. You have an understanding, of your spiritual nature, and you're just making choices. I'm choosing to buy Nikes instead of Adidas. It's not because I need them. It's like I have this desire for Nikes because I saw too many ads as a kid or whatever, and that's fine. I understand it all. It's not a big deal either way. Yes, there's a utility to understanding each one in itself. I mean, my general suggestion would be, and whether you want to do more than one at a time, I guess, is up to you. But for most people, it would be easier to, I'm trying to do it through concepts and showing you how the concepts play out in all the texts. That's what I'm going to do. But in terms of text study, it's probably good to get into a text and understand it. You never really fully understand these texts, right? But at least get the general idea. Then you look at another one. Then maybe you compare them. Like, what's the same and different? There's lots of similarity between the Yoga Sutras and the Spanda Karika, if you're a practitioner. Because we're not philosophers, right? We're just plain old meditators around here. And what you're going to find is that there's a lot of similarity between them. So that's really beneficial too. But what's really landed for me is how does this concept work with these different kinds of points of view? So all that said, the Bhakti Sutras are about devotion to God and the experience of loving God and surrender, basically. So that's in a way, everything's the same in this way. It's a dualistic, and that's a good thing, like I said before, because that's how our brain works naturally. So it's sort of reminding you. I like that book because it's just like a huge reminder. Right? It's a love book. It's encouraging you to love God, but it's really about love itself, and using the God concept to do that, because it's hard just to love without an object for our dualistic minds. So that's where it sits. I mean, in the end, everything becomes non-dual, if that helps. Like even Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, when you're done, right, it's all good. So you're in this non-dual land, but it's more of a matter of how we're getting there. So the Bhakti Sutras are encouraging this practice, right, of loving. And God is a really good, unless you have sort of religious trauma, but if you put that over here for a minute, this concept of God being something like giant, bigger than yourself, and something you can direct and have a relationship with. It's getting us to do that and reminding us that, and that's what the third part of our meditation system is alluding to, which is without this love, surrender piece, you won't get where you want to go. You'll never really understand yourself, because one way to look at it in a dualistic way is you are love. So how are you going to understand yourself if you don't experience it? And love with people, the Spanda Karika would say, it doesn't say this, but I guess if it talked, it would say, yeah, I guess you could do it with people. You could do it with anything. But God's a little cleaner, right? Like God doesn't forget to take out the trash. Like this thing you're having a relationship with, is you having a relationship with you. So you're going to be able to kind of pull off this spiritual adventure a little easier. How you study them, there's a lot of different ways to study them. So if you study too many things, most people won't really take any of them in. So I'll just put that out there. So, this is a course, but you're going to work with these books for years, hopefully. The Bhakti Sutras and those concepts like keep your practice alive and juicy. It keeps it real. Because without the relational love angle, it'll get dry on you. That might take 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 years, but it will get dry on you. You'll be sitting in meditation and you'll say to yourself, I have no idea why I'm doing this. That might have happened to you already. Like, I literally have no idea. What am I doing? And again, maybe a little more advanced in that. In the beginning, you're like, I know why I'm doing this. Speaking for myself, not you. I'm nuts. Like, I don't want, you know what I mean? Like, I wake up in the morning and my thought processes are not okay. So I'm going to like turn on that app with the music and like do what they told me to do because I want things to go better. Right. But you can imagine, if you haven't done this yet, if you meditate for 15 years, and you get through that part, you might still have some of that, but you feel like relatively sane and you're not being tortured by your own mind on a daily basis. The Bhakti Sutras kind of reminds us, right? It's like, hey, there's something, there's way more. There's way more than just getting out of our pain and suffering. That's not what knowing yourself is all about. It's just like a step or an outcropping. So as we like sort of contemplate and begin to think about helping other people, right, you can start to see how you have to know who you're talking to be. So I like to use the word mentor, because that's what meditation teachers are. They're mentors. They're like, how can I help you? Based on my experience, it's like, it's not just about teaching the techniques of meditations. It's like, who are you, right? And where are you at? They're like, I'm someone who wakes up every morning and feels like my mind is hitting me in the face with a hammer. I'm like, okay, I think we're in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali right now. And I think there's a few concepts that might help you. And here's a couple of meditations that might help you, right? Let's see if we can achieve what Patanjali says we can achieve, which is more contentment through these practices. Patanjali points out, like in a lot of translations, you'll see like the chosen goal, which I always love. It's definitely in the Mukunda Styles translation, because I always love seeing, because we have lots of different goals. Language is not good for this process. So, people will say to know yourself, to merge with God, to merge with nature, like to understand my spiritual nature, to alleviate suffering, go beyond suffering. But of course, these are goals from the perspective we're sitting in right now. So if you think of, and in the dualistic and out of like the sort of Patanjali world, which is, related to Hinduism, it's like a mysticism out of Hinduism, it's to get out of samskara. It's like to get out of like this constant state of rebirth and having to go through all these things in order for you to learn them. So from that perspective, it's to end that cycle, which is a really nice way to think about it, because even if you're not from that philosophy, weren't brought up that way, getting out of our patterns, getting out of our reoccurring patterns that don't benefit us. But what I wanted to say is that I think it might be important to remember that your articulation of sort of merging with spirit will change as you have different experiences in meditation. So I could tell you what my goal is as this person with this set of circumstances, with this much meditation under my belt, and it'll probably be a little different than yours, And what a lot of teachers do and texts do is kind of like throw they kind of throw us a bone. They say, here's the goal. Here's the goal. So in the Yoga Sutras, it's to get out of, and Buddhism too, it's like, if you're going to get out of all this suffering, the goal is to get out of it. The goal is to not be in a state of suffering, whether that's, probably early on, we think that's changing our circumstances. And then as we evolve, we realize it's understanding the way things are so they don't bother us as much. The Bhakti Sutras or Hafiz or any of these like ecstatic people would say it's to merge with God and experience the bliss that's, they say this in yoga sometimes too, like the bliss that's your birthright. Or the love, to experience love and fully, etc. But they're just words. So they're meaningful to you or they're not at any given time. But all those things I just said, I would sign up for, personally. They all sound like a good idea. So that's how I got into meditation. Once I started learning about spiritual practice, I was like, yeah, I want these things that you're talking about. Like, that sounds like a good idea. It doesn't seem like my life is as big and awesome as you're explaining. So bring it on. But again, you might start just by being like, I'm addicted to television and beer. Like, this can't be it. Like, and so the goal of meditation is to not be addicted to meditation and beer. And then it changes. And then, some people will also look at it in a life cycle and say, the real goal is to be able to die peacefully, to live our life fully. And then, you hear people say stuff like this all the time, just in general, right? It's like to die without regrets, or like to be content with the situation.